It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you, Jeffrey G, on this episode of the Festival of Bharat. It is such a delight to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Without further ado, let me just get to it. And I've been, you are an American. You were brought up in America, and you're a professor of religious studies, and your specific areas of interest are Hinduism and Jainism. So my question is, as a Christian American, what kind of notions or what kind of stereotypes did you encounter, if any, that you find today when you look back funny or even offensive?
Okay, so well, I did grow up in the Christian tradition, in the Catholic Church specifically, though from a pretty early age, I felt very drawn to Indian traditions and to Hinduism and Vedanta specifically. So when I was growing up, I did hear some of the stereotypes that we sometimes see of both of India and of Hindu traditions. So one thing that was impressed upon me from an early age is the idea that India is a very poor country and a place that deserves sympathy, and we need to send aid and help and so on. And I remember that very prominently as something that I heard growing up. And in terms of Hindu tradition, I really didn't learn anything about it in school until I had developed my own interest in it. I did that independently. It was not a large part of our education growing up, but I remember being intrigued by it because one idea that I was aware of at a young age was the idea that in Hindu traditions, there are many different gods, many different deities. And of course, in Christianity, there's the one God. And I was intrigued by the idea of the many different deities. I thought it was kind of cool. You know, I always enjoyed stories of the ancient Greek religions and ancient Greek and Norse and Roman, and I love those stories. And so I was intrigued by the idea that, in the West, that is depicted as something of the past, that there used to be people who believed in lots of gods, and now we just have the one God. And with the Hinduism, I thought, oh, there are people who still believe that. And I was really intrigued by that. So from my perspective, it was an intriguing, fascinating thing. It was not something that I saw at all in a negative light. And then I developed my own interest in it. My father passed away when I was young, and I started thinking a lot about the afterlife and what happens after we die. What's the purpose of suffering? All these sort of big philosophical questions. And while I was growing up in the Catholic tradition, and I would say I was pretty devout, but I was also very independent-minded. My parents were very independent-minded people. They always encouraged me to ask questions. They always encouraged me to, read a lot. And so I didn't feel bound by any one particular idea of, you must believe this, or else. I saw that around me. I grew up in a fairly conservative small town in Missouri, in the American Midwest. And especially my friends who were growing up in non-Catholic homes, in evangelical Christian homes, a lot of their parents were very, very strict and very conservative about what they should watch on television, what they should do. I was allowed to do anything I wanted, and so I ended up pursuing my interest in Hinduism. And so when I finally was taught about it in high school, I found I was actually correcting the teacher sometimes because the textbook was not very good, and I had read a lot more by then. And then the teacher only knew what was in the textbook. And finally, she, in frustration, she said, "Why don't you just talk about this in class one day?" So I did. I gave a little talk. That was my first foray, I suppose, into my field of teaching people about these things. So I would explain, like, what's being said in the book isn't really quite right, and there are a lot of things, like they were presenting things from the 19th century as though they were happening today. They were talking about things like sati and so on. And exactly. Yeah. So it was a very outdated picture, and I was reading these wonderful books by people like that. There was a book on Indian art by Ananda Kumaraswamy that I had read. I'd read a book by Sister Nivedita, of course, Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, books by Aldous Huxley, Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, and so on. So this is what I was reading, and I said, this is much more interesting than what they're saying in the textbook. So I've always, I guess, been kind of a rebel that way in terms of how these things are presented in America.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.